Good afternoon. I am thrilled today to be able to conduct an interview with Dr. Corey Miller. Dr. Corey Miller is the president of a group called RatioChristi, which I'm going to let him explain more about. I first came in contact with his organization when I went to a seminar a couple, 3 years ago, in which he and I were presenting information about our new book, which I co-wrote with him and Dr. Lynn Wilder and Dr. Vince Eccles about leaving Mormonism. And it was a Mormon scholars or a scholarly look at why we as people having their doctorates had chosen to leave Mormonism. And that's when I met Dr. Miller and began to know more about his organization, which I think is just so interesting. So I'm going to right now show you that here we are with me interviewing Dr. Miller. And Dr. Miller, welcome. How are you?
Hi, Latayne. Thanks for gathering together in this forum. This is great to be with you and reconnect.
Well, as he and I discussed before we actually started recording, this technology is pretty unfamiliar to him and pretty new territory to me. So we will be we'll be experimenting. And those of you who know me well know that there's probably going to be something funny happen in the middle of this, and that'll be okay. But Dr. Miller, could you tell me a little bit about RatioChristi, please?
Sure. RatioChristi.
RatioChristi, excuse me.
RatioChristi, if you like. RatioChristi stands for the reason of Christ. Ratio is the Latin, the Greek is logos in John 1:1. And it is a campus ministry focused intently on apologetics evangelism. Our people are evangelistic apologists. Our mission is equipping students and professors with historical, philosophical, and scientific reasons for following Jesus. We don't think of ourselves as eggheads, though we can nerd out on our topics. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, so that we listen more. If someone wants a hug, we give them a hug. If they need an argument, we're the campus ministry to give them an argument. We're on about 125 campuses, including satellite places in the Philippines, the UK, Canada, Pakistan, South Africa, and so forth. We've got a professors and student ministry, and we've been around for about 10 years. Vision is thoughtful Christianity, transforming lives on campus today, changing culture tomorrow. So in one respect, we see what we're doing is incredibly strategic, Latayne. If you want to clear up the mud or the pollution downstream, you've got to go upstream, and almost invariably that begins at the universities as the most influential institution in civilization.
If I can get to our, don't laugh. Why was the book that we did together something that comes under the category of apologetics?
Well, obviously, in Mormonism, we have a religion within Christendom, under the banner of Christendom, that we have some serious disagreements with. Love the Mormon people, but have big problems with Mormonism. But the heartbeat around this was that there's never been a book like this, in that the authorship were made up of people who were former Mormon, current, broadly speaking, evangelical, and possess academic doctorates. One reason that inspired that is because in the literature, I began to feel like some within the evangelical community who did possess doctorates, but who weren't former Mormon and didn't have the DNA, didn't live in Utah, didn't grow up in it, weren't insiders, were kind of being deceived a little bit and taken by some of the Mormon hierarchy or the influences there to think that the divide isn't that big between Mormonism and Christianity. And we wanted to have a new lane to communicate, a new platform, one that has never been done before, by former insiders who do have academic doctorates to be able to address these issues. And many people, when they leave Mormonism, even if they get an academic doctorate, they leave Christianity as well. Mm-hmm. And so we want to say, don't go left, go right, come back to the historical Christian creeds in the Bible. It's reliable. God exists. We have good reasons for this. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Well, let's go back to RatioChristi. that kind of apologetics with Mormonism is just a tiny sliver of the field of apologetics. And as I understand it, RatioChristi exists on college campuses to equip young people to meet and talk to their peers, as well as some of us old timers, but to mainly to equip people to talk to their peers on college campuses to address some of the big issues that are very prominent today, including the loss of the authority of the Bible in the minds of most young people. Could you talk a little bit more about that, please?
Yes, I would think that the major currents flowing through the university are naturalism in the hard sciences on one end of the campus, and it has been postmodernism, relativism on the other end, in the humanities and even in the social sciences. What has emerged in recent years very prominently and is starting to even not only move from the humanities and social sciences, but overarching into the hard sciences is critical theory or cultural Marxism or neo-Marxism or social justice, identity politics, call it what you want. It's all part of the same thing. If any of those terms work for someone listening as a sock thrown on the wall, you're probably in the right area. But, the Apostle Paul tells us to beware of false philosophy. In order to beware of it, you have to first be aware of it. And these movements are very hostile and subversive to the Christian faith. Almost a century ago, naturalism took over the universities. We lost the universities between 1880 and 1930, and most of them were started as Christian, but it was through Protestant liberal theology and false philosophy coming in from Europe that began to take it over. And by the 1930s, the dust was settling, and the conservative Christians were on the outside of their own institutions now. And then, postmodernism began to take root 1950s, but at least the professors from left to right were about 2.3 to 1 in ratio. So you had some viewpoint diversity, you had challenge on the free exchange of ideas, and there was some still, good health there in the competition of ideas. But in the mid 90s, things began to change radically, such that if this were like a mutual fund or a stock and you wanted to invest money, the ratio of left to right has gone through the roof like Elon Musk and Tesla. It's now, upwards to 12 to 1 across the country, 23 to 1 in New England, and in some disciplines like religious studies, it is 70 to 1.
Wow.
So for a Christian or a conservative, or maybe a conservative Christian to even speak up, it's so likely that there's such a prominence of political orthodoxy there. That's going to be their last time ever speaking up, and they will serve as an example for the others. And it creates an echo chamber, but it creates fear among students, fear among faculty, and now even leftist faculty are being kowtowed into submission by the new left faculty.
Wow. You mentioned that there are 4 areas that you would like to address about this. You may have kind of covered that in what you just said, but the 4 ways that one of them is free speech. Yeah, and I wonder if you would address those 4 things for me, please.
So typically, I've been president for the last 6 years, and we've been involved in probably 30 cases of legal proceedings. I was one as an adjunct professor of ethics, charged with creating a suicidal environment in a class. And Alliance Defending Freedom stepped in, helped get me exonerated, along with 2 atheist students of mine who defended me. But usually what we face on campuses deal with one of 4 issues. One, speech zones. And that is something that we are involved in a Supreme Court case right now. Oral arguments finished up on January 12th, and we will find out probably later, May or June. And that one's perfect for 2020. The narrative, young black male accosted by 2 white police officers and kicked off campus for disturbing the peace, for preaching the gospel.
Wow. Wow.
The last part doesn't fit the narrative so well, but that's where we're at with that. We've had 2 federal victories, again, one in speech zones, another on um, another issue that would come up would be uh, the all-comers policy, we might call it, that everybody without discrimination ought to be able to run for not just membership, but also student officers, so that we should be open to have an atheist or, um, a practicing homosexual or something like that be our president.
You're telling me then that what these lawsuits are protecting is your ability as an institution to decide who can have both membership and leadership in your organization. And if I hear you right, you're saying that if this trajectory you've described keeps going, campus organizations like you face what?
Well, already, so if I could just run through those 4, then speech zones, speech codes, there are certain words you cannot say. You dare not say hate speech. And that's a pretty broad notion what that means. Um, all comers policy, and then student fees, activity fees, monies that get sent back to the clubs, where some groups get them, but we don't. So we face all 4 of those issues. But yeah, what we're facing is in some cases, we don't get approval to be on the campus. Again, we are on about 125 campuses out of 5,000. So we've got a lot of applications before we get onto all 5,000. But we're not going to get on if they say, you guys are haters, you are bigots, you don't belong in the academic environment in this place where we celebrate diversity. It's hate or celebrate. What would you choose? What would Jesus do? But they don't say that. And so we don't get on. I mean, already in Cal State universities that impacted 400,000 students, we've not recovered from that one. We're still off campus there at Cal State universities and in many other areas in the country. Those places where we are on, if they find these things out that we don't follow the political truth, the social justice truth, then they can revoke us or kick us off campus. And so, there are a lot of Christian ministries, campus ministries, that don't want to be involved in litigation. They don't want to confuse the gospel and legal tension or some other issue. But we're not, Latayne, we're not talking school prayer here. We're not talking a theocracy. We're talking about, we are so far down the road, we're talking about the right to exist. It's not even free speech. It's cognitive liberty. It's if you even think the wrong thing and you're found out, you're out. So that's something recent that we're in preparation for. Is the Secular Student Alliance recently filed suit against the Trump administration on his last day in office, strategically so, going against the Department of Education, where Betsy DeVos oversaw for years, and back in end of last year put in a regulation that was intended to further protect religious conscience. And so the American Atheist and the Secular Student Alliance filed suit against the Trump administration's Department of Education, knowing full well that Biden would take over the next day and the lawsuit would be on his desk and he would say, oh, gee, yes, we're such terrible people. Let's just get rid of that regulation. We settle, uncle, you win. So instead, there are groups like maybe us that might be preparing to defend Biden and the administration because they really want us to, in favoring the US Constitution, which is the law of the land, not those universities.
Yeah, good. Well, Corey, I just can't thank you enough for kind of outlining this for people. Is there anything that you think that the parent of a university student right now needs to know? And of course, I have a vested interest in this. You know, my new co-authored book is coming out about talking with teens about sexuality. And that's one of a lot of these things have to do with gender, have to do with how you talk about gender on campus, how you talk about gender at all. And so I'm very interested in what you have to say, that what you would say to parents right now.
Yeah, you know, secularists have found a beautiful way to get Christian parents to pay for the apostasy of their own children, and they're called universities.
Wow. Wow.
This issue, LGBTQIAAMAP, it's a Trojan horse intended to camp out on the sentiments, much like we're used to with Mormon testimonies and, the persecution complex. Well, the LGBT community has mastered that, and the cry of victimization in our culture, you're the victim or a victimizer, oppressed or oppressor. That's why I was charged with creating a suicidal environment, simply because in an ethics class where my textbook was by an atheist, pro-gay atheist, anti-Bible atheist, I decided to educate rather than indoctrinate and give both sides. And that, for the student in there who was former pastor who turned gay, that just was uncalled for. So in our culture, if you are not prepared for this, you may say, I take no interest in politics. Yeah, one ancient Greek philosopher said, politics will take an interest in you. You may not have to face this stuff yet, but trust me, it's coming for you. We're in the front lines. We get to see what's coming before it hits the news because we're there on the campuses where a lot of the radicalization of the ideas are taking place and the student protests, but they don't need to protest right now because they're in conjunction with the administration and the faculty. So the parents need to prepare for this stuff, and they need to find resources to prepare their children, and they need to connect with organizations like RatioChristi to not only help their students to survive, but also thrive. We want to not just defend, we want to advance the cause of Christ and reclaim the intellectual voice of Christ on campuses. We've got good answers for these, but this new era calls for walking on eggshells, and it's not just apologetics, standard apologetics, it's rhetorical apologetics, being cautious in how we say what we say.
Well, Corey, thank you so much. And I'm going to conclude our joint part of this right now, just with a couple of slides. One is, and the fact that I'm very interested in a lot of these issues because of my upcoming book. And let me come to another one, and also to provide contact. Now you can contact Corey at RatioChristi. I always mispronounce that, I'm sorry, which I assure you from my experience being around those people that are doing this is a very worthy and essential ministry that we just have to help, we have to support. But for you, for the listener, for the viewer, you can go on their website and just see the many things that they have at RatioChristi to help you with your teen, with your college student, with how you can get involved, with why this ministry is important, and why people like Corey really need to be held up in your prayers and need to be encouraged in their work, because they are not just fighting against unbelief, they're fighting against our government in some cases, which is very discouraging. So again, I'm Dr. Latayne Scott. I appreciate your time here. And if I hope to do more of these interview type videos for people that are interested. I take very seriously the fact that people who listen to me when I do videos do it because they trust my judgment, and I take that very seriously. So at this point, I'm going to stop our video, and thank you all for being here most sincerely.